Joining us now for much more on this, Pennsylvania Senator and Banking Committee ranking member, who was, of course, at today's hearing, Senator Pat Toomey. Senator Toomey, welcome back. I know Omarova is your very favorite subject. We've talked about it many times. I just want to say, Elizabeth Warren has some nerve saying that, yeah, Omarova is great because, in fact, she finally said that all these people in the banking industry are, quote, a-holes. You know, Pat, the banking industry is an honorable industry. There's
Absolutely.
an awful lot of good people. They do a lot of good. I mean, I know you've been engaged in financial services all these years. That kind of got under my skin. I just wonder what you thought about it when you heard it.
Well, it's obviously outrageous that anyone could think that an entire industry, a huge industry, is populated with people she would describe that way. How ridiculous. And how would people in that industry think that they're going to be fairly treated and properly regulated by someone who has that low an opinion of them? It was really shocking, Larry. What we confirmed today is there is this huge wealth of comments and writings and interviews and articles in which Professor Omarova has advocated socializing America's financial services. It's as simple as that. She wants the Fed to take over all retail banking. She wants the Fed to allocate credit. And, you know, when she tried to dodge some of these things, like her quote about the bankruptcies of these small energy companies, and she said, oh, poor choice of words. No, that's exactly what she meant, because she followed up by saying, and then when these companies fail, the federal government will go in, take an equity stake, turn them into a different model, have them pursue a different line of business, and we'll all live happily ever after. She absolutely is an advocate for these radical policies. It's shocking that the Biden administration would nominate this person to be the chief regulator of America's banks.
I mean, I've known you all these years. You are an independent person. You're not going to oppose her just because she's a Democrat. I know that. Everybody listening should know that by now. But Senator Toomey, just this brief snapshots from Hillary Vaughn, you presumably heard the whole thing. Were you convinced that she didn't mean this or walked it back?
No.
Or, I mean, I didn't even hear much of a rebuttal from her.
No, she tried to kind of duck it, and one of the things that she kind of hid behind was this idea, well, these are just academic, this is sort of a thought exercise. Well, is it just a coincidence that every time you have had a thought exercise for the last 10 years, you came to a socialist conclusion? And by the way, in her papers and in testimony before Congress in the past, she's advocated for these things. It's not just like a random thought that crossed her mind. She's developed whole frameworks by which we could implement the government taking over the financial services of our country. Banking, investing, allocating credit. She's very clear. She thinks the private sector doesn't know how to do it, and the government would do a better job.
Yeah, you know, our mutual friend Steve Forbes on last evening talking about modern socialism through the regulatory state. That's what this would be.
Yeah.
Take it over through the regulatory state.
And could I just point out briefly on that point, because that's a really important point. The comptroller of the currency, the position to which she has been nominated, has enormous power over banks. The banks live or die by what the OCC decides. She decides who gets a charter, whether someone gets a charter. She decides whether a bank can engage in a merger. She decides whether a bank can open new branches. She decides whether or not to approve new lending products. It goes on and on, Larry, and there's a tremendous amount of discretion and subjectivity. We really want a person who has these socialist views exercising that kind of judgment?
And Senator, may I ask, or may I just add, the controller of the currency doesn't just regulate and supervise the largest banks. Tell me if this is wrong.
Oh, no.
They regulate the regional banks, the community banks, the local banks. By the way, these are folks who are prominent, right, in their small towns and communities. They finance business. They're not a-holes. I'm sorry.
No. The OCC regulates all nationally chartered banks. And that's a big majority of the banks in the country. And it absolutely includes community banks, where one of the community bankers put it very well. The whole business model is really quite simple. You take deposits from the local community and you turn around and lend money to the local community. That's what you do. She wants to ban deposit taking by community banks. She wants it all to have to go to the Fed. It's unbelievable.
And I take it, Senator, that you never did get your hands on her Moscow State University thesis.
No, so what happened was I asked for this, and one of the reasons that I think it was fair and relevant to ask for this thesis is because she advertised her thesis as recently as 2017. If she's bragging about and promoting this paper in 2017, I think it's perfectly fair for us to know what's in it. So I asked for it. I sent a letter asking for it. For 6 weeks, we get no response for her, although she gives interviews in which she says all the reasons why she doesn't think she should have to turn it over. And then just last Friday, she informed us, oh, I don't have it after all.
So apart from, some far-left members of the bank committee, do you sense that a bunch of Democrats are not going to be satisfied that she's not transparent and she, these kinds of socialist approaches are not useful for our banks? Do you think they're going to vote against her?
I don't know how this turns out, Larry. I really don't. Certainly, Senator Tester was very clear that he has significant reservations. Do they rise enough, high enough to the level that he would decide to vote against her? We just don't know. Senator Warner expressed his displeasure that she had opposed some very modest small community bank regulatory reform measure that he supported that was bipartisan. So there definitely were reservations expressed by Democrat senators. I don't know how they're going to vote in the end.
One last point, and I want to ask you about this crazy budget bill, but honestly, throughout the whole country, this is the best person the Biden administration can put up for this important job? Honestly, really?
Unbelievable, right? I mean, look, she might be a wonderful human being. Academics should absolutely be free to dream up all kinds of crazy ideas. Knock yourself out in academia.
Yeah.
You don't put someone like that in charge of regulating America's national chartered banks.
Last one, and you're generous with your time, Senator Toomey, as you always are. The CBO is supposedly going to put out their Build Back Better scorecard at 5 p.m. this afternoon or some such thing. What do you know about it? What are you thinking about it? And isn't the Senate, no matter what they do in the House, isn't the Senate just going to rewrite this thing?
If anything ends up passing, it will be what the Senate produces. Because the determinants here are going to be Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. Let's be honest. That's what it's going to come down to. I don't put really any stock behind the CBO score because they're bound by very narrow rules that are unrealistic. You've talked about this, Larry. You've exposed this very well. They've got this gimmick whereby they launch all these giant, incredibly expensive programs, and then they pretend they're all going to end in a year.
Yeah.
They have no intention of their ending. And the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, one of the great educational establishments of my state, has said that this will be a $4.6 trillion spending spree blowout if it's enacted, what the House has. And that tells me, I think that's a much more accurate picture than what the CBO comes up with.
Yep, got it. Senator Pat Toomey, as always, sir, thank you ever so much. Hope to see you soon. Thanks for all the work you've been doing.